raining like crazy. I tried to do a video last night, but the quality was so bad that I even though I'm just in the car yapping, I don't want to release that. So I'm going to do it over, but I'm going to change it up a little bit because everybody's been talking about Liz Cheney. It kind of stinks because a lot of the thoughts that I was conveying came out after I would have released my video. So that kind of stinks. But either way, I still have a different angle on her and the end result. So I'm still going to kind of touch on her, but I more so want to talk about what the leftists' end game is. What are they really trying to do? Or what are they really trying to avoid? Liz Cheney lost, as we all know by now, and she lost really bad. I mean, really bad. For perspective, she won by, I think she had 70% of the vote when she first went to Wyoming. And after her first term, she lost by over 35% of the vote. So she did not do well, or 35 points. The confusing part to a lot of people seems to be that her arrogance in the loss. And I don't know why that confused so many people, because the fact that she shifted the way she did should have tipped everyone off to how arrogant of a human being she'd have to be to do what she did. So I don't know why people were confused at her speech. It was very long, very weird. She did compare herself to Abraham Lincoln, which is always odd when somebody does something that's nowhere in comparison. Typically somebody would say, hey, outside of Abraham Lincoln, I'm able to achieve this, this, and this. But she didn't. She compared herself directly to him, which is funny.
The great and original champion of our party, Abraham Lincoln, was defeated in elections for the Senate and the House before he won the most important election of all. Lincoln ultimately prevailed, he saved our Union, and he defined our obligation as Americans for all of history.
She never liked Trump, but she was just looking for the avenue to quote-unquote take him down. So when she saw her opportunity, she seized it. And the left, who hates her, allowed her to play that game, and they just used her. And as smart as she thinks she is, whether she knew they were using her or not, she chose bashing a man over her constituency, which is never a good idea. She then blamed him for her loss, which is very strange because she chose to make her career about him, not the other way around. He didn't do anything to her. He insulted her father, who was the former defense secretary, vice president. He insulted him and that war. And I'm not sure he ever really said anything directly about Dick Cheney. He definitely bashed the war.
The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, all right.
There's no reason for her to have taken the approach that she did, other than arrogance. I think she thought, okay, he's gone. The people are going to turn on him because in her mind, they see this as an insurrection, a weaponless insurrection. When people got into the Capitol building, somehow there was no way that the government could get them out. There's no way that they could be arrested. That in order to take over the government, all you had to do was get in the Capitol and protest or riot. That's enough to destroy democracy. Because that's what they've been claiming this whole time. Our democracy is fragile. Our democracy is under attack.
We came critically close to losing this democracy as we've come to know it.
As we near the one-year anniversary of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, there's a very real sense that there remains a clear and present danger to our democracy. The New York Times editorial board marking the new year with this dire warning, writing, quote, January 6th is not in the past. It is every day. The Republic faces an existential threat from a movement that is openly contemptuous of democracy and has shown that it is willing to use violence to achieve its ends.
For the first time in our history, a president had not just lost an election, he tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol. But they failed. They failed.
I would have said 5 years ago, it would be very hyperbolic for anyone to come out publicly and say that democracy was under threat in the United States. Today, I don't think that statement is sufficient. I think that's the level of danger we're seeing to democracy right now.
You will notice that the Washington Post chose to illustrate this story, the photo of the insurrectionist mob facing off against police officers on January 6th. That day, of course, is the most striking example of our democratic backsliding.
I think we're all going to be held to account one day for what we did when our democracy was under threat.
Do you feel like our democracy is under threat right now?
I do feel our democracy is under threat.
As a country, we're facing very challenging and difficult times. We're facing a moment where our democracy really is under attack and under threat.
Even if 800 people had gotten into the Capitol, what are they going to do? Assign a new president? The whole premise is ridiculous. Our democracy was never at risk. They never attempted to overthrow the government. You know how I know that? I said this before. There were no guns. There were 4 weapon charges. None of them were for being used. They were just for being on the premises, and they were all handguns. So to say that they were trying to overthrow the government is so disingenuous that I can't even wrap my mind around how anyone could believe it. Whether or not you knew they had guns doesn't matter. When they got in the Capitol, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Disqualify Congress people? Dismiss the Supreme Court? Replace the president and vice president? What could they possibly have done to overthrow the United States government? Do you really think it's that fragile? I mean, I guess if you look at the Confederacy, if it were that easy during the Civil War, all they had to do was get in the Capitol and just stake a claim over it. On its face, it's ridiculous. But let's move past that point because whatever. She thought that the people were going to turn on him, and then she would step into the role of leader of the Republican Party. She didn't understand why he was popular. She still to this day doesn't understand why he's popular. She also didn't understand that a huge portion of his base are not Republican. We are not Republicans. We don't even like Republicans. We don't. We like what their platform says, but they never do what their platform, well, I won't say never. They don't always do what their platform says, and they're weak. So we prefer a stronger version of what they're willing to do. They're weak. So we're not Republican. A lot of his base is not Republican. A lot of Republicans hate him. You know why? Because most of those rhinos are status quo, or what Kwame Brown would call go along, get along gang. They all get rich. They sit there in D.C. They don't go home. They don't represent us. And then they pass bills like this Inflation Inflation Recovery Act or Rebuilding Act, whatever it's called. Anytime you have a bill like that, just flip it in reverse. Just flip it in reverse. If it's an Inflation Recovery Act, just flip it and say, well, they're acting like they're trying to recover from the inflation. No matter what it says, just flip it that way. If it's a Climate Change Act, okay, flip it around. We're acting like we're changing climate. The inflation bill, admittedly, by Joe Manchin and some schmo, it doesn't impact inflation.
But when it comes to inflation, is it misleading to call this the Inflation Reduction Act for Americans when it's not going to make their grocery bill cheaper? It's not going to make everyday goods cheaper for them.
Why would it? Well, immediately it's not, but I mean, we never seen anything happen immediately. Like today, it's turn the switch on and off.
As soon as the act goes into effect, I hope that all of the provisions will begin to work. I know that those who've been blaming President Biden for the inflation going up are now giving President Biden all the credit for inflation going down. So we're moving things in the right direction already.
And what parts of the bill do you think will quickly work on that specifically?
Next question.
You can't spend $700 billion and print money to bring down inflation. That's not how it works. I talked about this in my last video. You can't do that. It doesn't even make sense. It's all a contradiction in terms. Then you have to question why the media wasn't on this before it came down. Why were more people on the right talking about the 87,000 IRS agents being hired as a result of this bill? Those 87,000 IRS agents is more than doubling the amount of agents that are in the Internal Revenue Service. Why would they do that? Are there 87,000 billionaires that they're going to go after? They always say they're not going after the middle class. Why do you need that many? I think the number was like 70. I think there was like 75,000 current IRS agents right now before this stupid act was passed. Why do you need to add more than double of what you have? Like, it doesn't make sense unless you plan on using them. Why else would you hire them? There's a purpose when you hire people. And then there's that whole gun thing. Now, we've been hearing about this since the Obama years, where the IRS and the federal government is buying bullets. And we've always asked, why? What are they going to do with it? Why would the government need to purchase bullets from the private sector? It's very strange. Well, now we realize why. It wasn't strange. It makes perfect sense. The IRS, their purpose is to collect taxes from the American people. Why would the IRS agent be willing to carry a gun and be willing to use deadly force if they're simply collecting taxes? Were they deputized law enforcement? Are they gonna be deputized law enforcement? If so, are they coming to catch a guy for tax evasion with their guns drawn? Isn't that something that the police can do in an escort? I mean, they're trained to basically study data on a screen and say, oh, this person didn't pay such and such. Where does military training or police training come into play there? Because we just spent the last 3 years, I don't remember exactly when the whole George Floyd thing started, 2-3 years talking about police training. So now we're going to train the IRS up to the level of police when the police also need training? Was that in the bill? Was there spending for police training in this Inflation Recovery Act? Or are we just acting like we're going to recover from the inflation? It's very strange to me. But I still want to approach this from a different direction, because Nancy Pelosi kind of spilled the beans as to why they're doing what they're doing when it comes to Trump.
We call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and if they see it's reported in the press that this, and this, so they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
What is the end game for the federal government right now? What are they trying to do by trying to destroy Trump? They keep talking about how unpopular he was and how it was a decisive defeat in the last election of him. Then why wouldn't you want him to run again? Wouldn't it make sense to just let him get beat again? He's so unpopular, and they would say these things regularly, and it's always confused me that they don't want him to be their opponent, if that's the case. Wouldn't you want to go against the person who they say everybody hates? That's the perfect opponent. Am I crazy? What people on the right should be concerned with is people on the left telling them who they should have as a candidate and who's not morally up to par to face them, as if they have say. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. I would love, if we play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to be able to have my coaches and my general manager staff go to the Bucs coaches and their general manager staff and say, you know what? We don't think you should use Tom Brady this week when you guys play us. Why would the left be allowed to have a say in who the right's candidate is? It's absurd. The person that they say they don't want to go against is who I'm going to choose. Why wouldn't I? If he's your easiest competition, you should be encouraging Donald Trump to run. And this is what happened in 2016. They laughed, they joked, they said, oh my God, I hope he runs. It would be such an easy, boom, they got hit by a train out of nowhere. And Hillary lashed out, and actually, that entire side claimed he was illegitimate. That he didn't win, that he stole the election. John Lewis said he's illegitimate.
I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
You do not consider him a legitimate president. Why is that?
I think the Russians participated in helping this man get elected, and they helped destroy the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. I don't plan to attend inauguration. It will be the first one that I miss since I've been in the Congress.
Hillary Clinton said he is illegitimate.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did. I do think that he knows that he's an illegitimate president.
There's no doubt that the Russians did interfere in the election, and I think the interference, although not yet quantified, if fully investigated, would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered on his behalf.
So do you believe President Trump is an illegitimate president?
Based on what I just said, which I can't retract.
Why would they do that? They did it all from 2016 all the way to 2020. They said the same thing. Hillary Clinton won. Donald Trump stole the election. Couldn't wrap her mind around losing. Now, when Donald Trump says the same thing, they can say with certainty, this is the cleanest, best run election of all time. Really.
Let me say it again.
The 2020 election was the most secure
Election in American history.
Let me begin by asking a very simple question. Do we know the truth about what really happened in the 2020 election?
I think millions of Americans know something went wrong, and they have little pieces, and no one's really put it together.
I'm agnostic on this question, and I am awaiting more information.
If I believed the president were a Nazi, I might steal an election.
Bold accusations require bold evidence, and they haven't seen it.
We have been working on something big.
Show me the money.
Do you have video evidence?
4 million minutes of surveillance video around the country.
What you're about to see is disturbing.
So this is 1 o'clock in the morning.
Don't we all vote at 1 o'clock in the morning?
On one night, this person, this mule, went across 6 counties to 27 different drop boxes.
I call it the Mexican mafia, seriously, because they work like that.
This is jaw-dropping. What you showed is frightening.
It's just sickening to me.
Now we come to the most important question of all. Was the magnitude of vote trafficking enough to tip the balance in the 2020 presidential election?
It's not a leap to say this would have made a difference.
They have ruined Election Day in the United States of America. That's provable. And that's enough for me to fight the left with every fiber in my body.
Without free and fair elections, we are not a democracy. We are a criminal cartel masquerading as a democracy.
2,000 mules. Tell me those mules weren't doing what Dinesh D'Souza said they were doing. Well, just watch it. Give it a chance. Give it a shot. Do that. Do that. And then come back to me and say, there's no proof. And then even worse, come back to me and say, well, no, it was the most upstanding election of all time. But either way, they can call that the big lie. Hillary Clinton can do it for 4 years, and that's just truth. Why? Because they agree with it. See how that works? One is turned into a borderline treasonist, and the other one is a hero who's considering running again. Good luck, because she's going to be running against Liz Cheney. But their end goal is simply to disqualify Donald Trump from running. But I have inside information on this. And they're going to think I'm crazy. But the president was never impeached. The House impeachments, the articles that they brought up, they were never convicted. In order for a president to not be able to run, he's got to miss the age requirement. He would have to have been impeached fully, not just brought up on charges and never convicted. And he's got to be a citizen coming from here. So if he got arrested tomorrow, there's nothing in the Constitution that says he couldn't run from jail. And this is a fact. And I don't care who you are and what you say, I know you're wrong. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pull out a Constitution, or you're going to have to show me precedent that says he can't. Because what I just said is a fact. He can run from prison. Now, what they're trying to do is smear him so they can say, hey, you guys can't run. A felon, regardless if it's a manufactured felony, that doesn't matter. You guys can't run a felon. That's how they're trying to get rid of him. But they are not under the illusion that if he gets indicted in any way, that is enough to stop him from running for president. Because I think Now, this is my opinion. He would be more likely to win if they throw felony charges at him. Just like right now, he's more likely to win because they went into the man's home. They stole some passports. The media lied about them stealing stuff from his home and never retracted it when they found out, yeah, it's true. We're going to give the passports back. Why would they take them? What did they think they were going to get out of it? Other than harassment, why would you take someone's passports? It's no different than an ID. It's giant. It's in a book. Like, why would you take that? If you're an agent, what made you think that was okay? It wasn't an accident. It's not on your list. It's illegal. You did it, but you claimed it's a mistake. I just need you guys to think about this stuff. Their end goal was to get him to not run, but they cannot stop him from running. Unless they can figure out another way to impeach him, which isn't going to happen. He's not in office. They know they're done. Politically, they know they're done. So they're just trying to taint what happens when the Republican Party takes over. Because they also know there's a lot of cowards on the right. A lot of cowards. And they'll head for the hills like this Cheney did. And I don't know why people don't see right through this. I don't know how they thought that this raid was going to work, especially when they didn't do it legally. And I'll argue this with anyone as well. They were supposed to send in an objective party, which is called taint, and they were supposed to check all the records to make sure they weren't privileged. If they were privileged, that party would separate that from other stuff, and then they can take the other stuff, not the privileged stuff. It is illegal what they did. It's called taint because they literally tainted their own case. And that's a prevention method to stop that from happening. So if Merrick Garland tries to take this to court, it's going to get thrown out. Unless they have another crooked judge like the Epstein guy. And in that case, who knows what's going to happen.